Hey guys, it's the Dude Seriously Show. I'm Jonathan. This is my pal Jared.
Nice to meet you. Glad to be here again, man.
Yeah, man. So last time we talked about Justice League, and this is the first installment in our Marvel review series. Leading up to Infinity War, we're going to be doing one Marvel movie each week, with Black Panther kind of sliding in there when it comes out. So other than that, we'll be in sequential order. But we're starting off with the first one, Iron Man. We just finished watching the first installment in the MCU. So Jared, what did you think about Iron Man?
Man, very nostalgic. I had forgotten how much emotion it had actually stirred up in me when I had first seen the movie. It was all brought back. It was like a flood. It aged well for me. Some of the other things I noticed is, I wouldn't say it's necessarily a negative thing, just because the MCU's kind of matured a little bit. We've got a lot. We got 10 years. 2008 is when this thing came out.
Crazy.
Long time ago. So obviously saying that it aged well is actually a huge thing because, you know, you look back at some of the first X-Men installments. it's not as great.
You know, some of the early X-Men stuff, not to get off topic, but some of the early X-Men stuff is like really good, but it feels dated. And like you said, this has just aged so incredibly well. And I've had a lot of fun watching this.
Yeah.
I feel like the movie, you know, it does like the three classic acts of the film. You know, the first act sets it all up, the middle develops, and then everything comes to a culmination at the end. But it's weird because I feel like the first act of this movie is hands down the best.
Oh yeah,
with the cave and, you know, something that we noticed while we were watching is like the first 3 or 4 minutes were so funny.
Is it true you went 12 for 12 with last year's maximum cover models?
That is an excellent question. Yes and no. March and I had a scheduling conflict, but fortunately the Christmas cover was twins.
And, you know, of course, Robert Downey Jr. is known for the comedic angle that he brings to these movies, but I just don't remember this movie being as funny as it was.
I think that's kind of a testament to how well it's aged as well. As obviously the humor still holds true, and we'll kind of build off of that. Is that, you know, the first few minutes are extremely funny, and it definitely points to Tony Stark's persona, especially through the 10 years of the MCU universe it holds. At the same time, it gets right down to business.
Yeah.
I do like the fact that it kind of leads off with, you know, Tony's initial personality, and then gets right into his trauma, per se, to lead him into that first act of him realizing, I've got to change myself.
Sure.
But that humor was never lost. His persona was never lost in who he is ideally, but he just had a switch, realizing, I've got to be a different person. I've got to be a hero.
Yeah.
He never considered himself a hero. Obviously, he says it in the movie, but it just does a wonderful job of bringing you right into the fold, not really being dark and gritty, but at the same time, breaking the ice a little bit, and then getting right into it.
And it's crazy because more often than not, just in classic storytelling, you know, that switch of realizing you need to change doesn't really happen in the first part of the movie, much less as instantaneously as it does in this movie.
Yeah, I feel like it's kind of middle of the movie most times around.
Yeah, very much so. And he does have a little change there too, where he realizes his endearment to Pepper, and you know, it's just that beginning part of the movie really sets up so much when he's in the cave with the doctor, who's also a prisoner there, and he asks him if he has any family, and Tony says, no, I don't have any family, and he goes, the man who has everything also has nothing.
Yeah.
And that's like, we're like in the first like quarter of this movie, if not earlier, and that's just, man, hits so hard.
Yeah.
With this being the first part of the MCU, the very first one, I think that's what we should talk about, right? Is that this movie stands alone so well. Of course, it sets up S.H.I.E.L.D. and that unbelievable post-credits.
Oh, yeah.
Nick Fury showing up. I remember being a youngster in the theater and sitting through the credits with my dad at the local tiny movie theater. It wasn't even half filled. And we sit through the credits, and Nick Fury comes on, and my dad and I just look at each other, and we're like, what?
I'm here to talk to you about the Avenger Initiative.
We didn't live on the internet and scour for new Avengers news, and so, I mean, he just name dropped.
I don't even know if we necessarily knew. We probably just heard it through the grapevine that there were post-credit scenes.
Sure.
Marvel kind of set the standard for that.
Yeah.
And everybody nowadays is waiting after credits to see that, which is great because everybody, you can see who was a part of the movie.
And that's not an exclusive thing to Marvel movies anymore.
No, it's not. They just kind of set the trend with it, I feel like.
Sure.
I don't really remember anything standing out, and it's kind of that mind-blown mentality of waiting and then seeing and hearing Avengers. I can't remember what
The
is that?
Avenger Initiative.
Thank you, Avenger
But it's
Initiative.
still amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's like it sticks. You will never forget that.
I think as far as aging, I think the CGI in this movie is aged very
Yeah,
well.
it did very well.
You know, Stain, great villain. He's a little bit weak, I'll say.
Yeah.
You know, and now with 10 years of superhero movies, not just Marvel movies, but superhero movies, it's kind of getting a little redundant with the whole, like, mirror, you know, like, you have the good guy and then the bad guy who's just a bigger, badder version of the same set of superpowers. But this movie, I feel like, has a lot of parallels to Ant-Man. You know, the hero has a suit that's made of tech. He's got, you know, the business guy that's kind of, like, butting heads with him.
Yeah.
You know, the family aspect, the trying to make yourself better, the stolen tech. There's a lot of similarities there.
You know, they say impersonation is the best form of flattery. Maybe they realized that this worked.
Yeah.
And they built off of that, and obviously it worked for it as well.
And it's the only film in the MCU that really doesn't world build too terribly much. I mean, I would argue that Iron Man 2 world builds maybe the most of any of them. Of any non-Avengers
Watch it again.
I know, 2 weeks.
Just to see all that.
But you know, Iron Man 2, you had War Machine come in, and S.H.I.E.L.D.
true.
and Justin Hammer.
Yeah.
The movie's so much bigger than this, and
Yeah.
we'll talk about it, don't worry.
Yeah.
But Iron Man is definitely up there. It's just in a league of its own. And without this movie, we wouldn't be talking about the MCU at all.
So second act for me, I feel like it did a very good job of, going back to the first act, laid that foundation, laid the realization that Tony Stark needed to change to somebody better. Second act, I think, did a very good job of building off of the smaller things.
Sure.
His relationship with Pepper Potts, Tony Stark as a person, how he was changing, his relationship with Clarence.
Clarence.
I don't remember the actor's name or.
Thinking Terrence.
Terrence, yeah.
Howard, the
Good
actor.
gracious. Yeah,
Clarence.
It's good stuff.
Everybody gets one, dude.
His relationship with Rhodey, his relationship with Obadiah.
Have you heard the deal with Terrence Howard and why he didn't return? For
No,
the sequel?
what was with that?
Yeah, so Terrence Howard is actually one of the highest paid actors in the first Iron Man film.
Okay.
And so he, you know, had a lot riding on it and blah, blah, blah. And he actually fought Marvel Studios and said that he wanted equal pay with Robert Downey Jr. for the sequel, or maybe he wanted more from what was before. But in any case, he was one of the top paid actors of the first Iron Man and wanted to be for the second one. And they were like, no, we don't really need you that
Yeah, see, I
much.
feel like he was probably one of the weakest links in the movie to begin with.
Yeah.
I didn't really feel sure. Tony mentions that, or no, I guess it's Rhodey in the movie mentions that Tony Stark's one of his best friends. Didn't really ever get that vibe from him, and I think we kind of touched while we were watching the movie. I can't remember if you had said it or I did. I made this comment that the character change was definitely needed.
In character change, you of course
Right.
mean the change from Terrence Howard in this movie to Don Cheadle
Yep.
in every other MCU
Yeah,
film.
I think that Don Cheadle and Robert Downey definitely have a better dynamic
Way better chemistry
between Iron Man and War Machine. It's just so much more connection there.
I actually believe that they're friends.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can walk into the second movie and be like, okay, well, that's not the same face I
Yeah.
knew, but at the same time, 5 minutes later, you're like, oh, this works. Okay.
So like Don Cheadle and Robert Downey Jr. in all the other MCU films, I feel like they're the kind of buds that were like college roommates and just always got along well. And I feel like Terrence Howard and Robert Downey Jr. were like two guys that met in a party one time and were like cool, but not buds. They're just
I almost felt like Terrence Howard was almost like a parent figure in this movie.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
it was not a best friend mentality.
yeah.
Don Cheadle definitely nailed it on that part, and to the point where like you completely forget about Terrence, and then we watched the movie and I'm like, oh yeah,
Yeah.
that's War Machine, and you know he gives the nod to the original, well not the original suit, but the second silver suit like one day.
Yeah, I think he says
but-
next time.
Yeah, next time, but sorry, wasn't next time, buddy.
No, there was never a next time for Terrence.
Next time, baby.
So, Iron Man, any final thoughts to leave us with, Jared?
For me, and I feel like this will probably be true for a lot of people, I think that watching Iron Man again, it definitely reminded me of the firm concreted foundation that the MCU laid with their first movie. to lead the charge to the rest of the universe. 10 years ago, the movie came out, aged very, very well. Like you said, it could be perfectly fine as a standalone movie because it didn't do much world building, but at the same time, I think we all knew what was coming, especially with the post-credit scenes that kind of blew everybody's mind. So I think it did a great job, and it just reminded me of how excited I was back then and how I was watching it again today.
And I guess the big thing to talk about too is a little bit of history behind it.
Yeah.
Marvel at this point had sold off Spider-Man. They'd sold off Blade. I believe they sold off Blade at this point. Daredevil, all X-Men characters, and as obscure as this is, Namor was sold off. Man-Thing was sold off. Fantastic Four, and who am I forgetting? Oh, Hulk. Hulk was a Universal.
Gracious.
Yeah, so Marvel had sold off a lot of their characters because in the 90s there was this slump after the big comic book collector boom.
Yeah.
And the best way to bounce out of that was to sell the film rights. So some of them went to Fox, some of them went to Sony, so on and so forth. But Marvel really had only B and C list heroes. Iron Man, Captain America, Thor. In 2017, it's hard to call those guys B and C listers, but 10 years ago, they really were.
Yeah.
And so Marvel really built this universe without their flagship characters like Wolverine, Human Torch, Spider-Man, Hulk, But Hulk comes out next, which will be our next review, and that was made with Universal. I think Universal distributed it, but it's still a Marvel Studios film. There's some gray area there.
Yeah.
But Marvel really bet everything on this movie financially in that if this Iron Man movie didn't deliver big time, there would be no MCU and maybe no Marvel Comics. Who knows? Of course, we ultimately know that Disney ended up buying them out, which I think everybody would say was for the better.
Yeah.
Quality's gone up. Not that quality was bad to begin with, but it went from like 9.5 to 10 consistently. Well, except Iron Fist, but
We don't talk about that.
that's on Netflix, so we won't talk about that. Well, that's Iron Man. This was a blast to talk about, dude. Thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me.
Dude, seriously. It was a great show. Love talking about these MCU films, so make sure you tune in next week because we'll be talking about Incredible Hulk. And it's going to be great leading up to Infinity War, talking about all these movies in order. And thanks for tuning in. We'll see you on the next one.
Thanks.
Dude, seriously.